Hey, party people. PVC, vinyl, clear plastic is a hot trend on the runways lately, so I've been getting some requests for this rendering tutorial. And it's been a minute since a good old-fashioned rendering tutorial on my channel, yeah? And you know how fashion works. You learn the skill, because even when it goes out of style, the trend will come back around again, For rendering purposes, there are three categories of PVC. We have opaque PVC, so solid, not see-through. So basically, you have your base color, you have your shadow color, and you have your blinding white highlights. And then you have clear, no color PVC. What you need is the absolute lightest of grays for your fabric colors. And then again, your blinding white highlights. And then the third category is clear PVC with some color. So you basically merge my sheer fabrics tutorial and my shiny fabrics tutorial and ta-da! Okay, that explains everything, right? Okay, get to work. I'm kidding. I'm going to render with markers because it's faster, but you can follow this tutorial for watercolor or gouache renderings too. The only difference is when you paint, you have to make sure that each paint layer is 483% dry before moving on to the next step. You want crisp edges on your highlights and shadows for these materials. Any good rendering always starts with a good drawing. Pay attention to the thickness of your PVC swatch when you render. You're gonna get some, more crinkly ones. This one looks a little bit thinner. This one looks very thick. It sticks out and it just stays out. It doesn't really collapse down on the model's hips. So real quick for materials, I'm going to be using the Borden & Riley Smooth Cotton Comp 100% Pure Rag marker paper. We'll see how awesome it is. Most of you who have been following my channel know that I use a lot of different brands on a day-to-day basis. Please go watch my different media materials playlist for more information. And today I'm going to render these little black pants because I do want to talk a little bit about rendering black. I have a video, which I'll link below, that swatches black markers from many different brands. The gist of black marker renderings is to find different shades of black. You want to use a soft, light black for your base fabric color and a dark black for your shadows. When you're painting, you will use the most opaque black with the least amount of water as you can get away with, and then you'll use a slightly softer black with a touch more water for the base. Whenever you are using a new brand of marker paper, the first thing you want to do is check which side is the right side of the paper. So on this paper, the top side gives us this result, and the bottom side gives us this result. So I prefer this one, so I have decided that I'm going to use the underside of the paper as the right side of my paper. And I like to draw on the wrong side and render on the right side of my paper. So I've already marked, and I always do this, I always mark the wrong side of the paper before I tear it out of the pad. So I marked a little W for wrong, drew on the wrong side, and now we're gonna flip it. And why do I do that? Because I can work faster. Marker paper is see-through enough that you can still see the drawing that you have. And you can, with black it doesn't matter as much, but you can marker really fast without worrying about pencil smudges. And you're gonna, redo the outside drawing anyway. So I'm using the Prismacolor black, and I'm going to fill in all my fabric. And then I'm going to use this as my light source. So my shadows are going to be on this side. I'll link to some videos that go more in depth on shading. This is really focusing on the PVC rendering in this video. But hopefully the camera is picking up on how much darker this Chart Super Black is compared to the Prismacolor Black. And then we're gonna let that dry. And yes, even marker needs a second to dry sometimes, especially when you have so many layers going on. And then we're going to put in the white highlights. And let's talk about white. Let's talk about what materials can get you the intense white highlights. Number one, whitewash is very opaque, but can be a bit of a challenge to work with. And yes, you can use opaque whitewash on thinner papers because you're not using a lot of paper to get the effect that you want. You can use a white gel pen for super skinny highlights, but it can be pretty tedious to try to fill in large spaces like here and here with such a skinny gel pen. This is my new favorite thing right now. This is a Posca paint pen, and it's basically poster paint in pen form. And it's pretty opaque. So that's my light source. And so I'm gonna have like a super highlight here. And I'm not necessarily gonna follow these highlights because remember, I picked this light source, so I'm creating shadows and highlights with my light source. This clearly has a full frontal light source. And the whole point of teaching and learning shadow and light is so you can create your own. So the tops of the thighs are going to get a pretty wide highlight. Here too. Okay. A little bit turned this way, but still the tops. And then, you know, every time it wrinkles, the top is going to get the highlight and the bottom is going to get the shadow. So it's highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow. Highlight, shadow. This is not going to get much of a highlight just here. And some of this crinkle coming from those wrinkles there. You see these little wrinkles? And you could do some of those with the gel pen, and then this part of the shin that's facing the light is going to get the highlight. And, you know, you can add some details with the white gel pen, but you don't really need it. Ta-da! If you watch my shiny fabrics rendering tutorial, then you know that I teach a way where you can leave the white of the paper for the highlight instead. If you want to watch that video for more in-depth, slow, kind of careful tutorial, go watch that video. I'll link it below. But to go over it really quick, what I do is, first of all, I always cover this so I'm not smearing my hand all over the illustration. What I like to do is take my shadow color first. And remember, this is our light source. So my shadows are going to sit here. And all these wrinkles coming up from this lifted leg. And then under her butt. And then this kind of drape that's coming across. So that's my shadow on my pencil skirt. And so then I know where my highlights are. You know, they're going to be here at the top of her butt. And here along this thigh that's facing the light. And then I'm going to go in with my soft, lighter black. And you could do this with any color. You know, you start with your shadow color, put in the shadows, you leave the white of the paper for where the highlights are going to be, and then fill in with your base fabric color. And I do the shadows first just to help you figure out where your highlights need to be. And if you need to go back in with your shadow color, so be it. But you can, I don't know if the camera is showing that to you, but I could still see it. So it's just a matter of punching up that color. And you can kind of pull those edges together with the edge of your paint pen. Or, you know, you can make your highlights smaller by going in with your marker, depending on what kind of effect you like. And then go in with your gel pen and put in your skinnier highlights. Those are just the drape lines. And then if I wanted to show, that's the seam of my skirt. Super shiny PVC leggings and pencil skirt. Blinding highlights. Let's do this one. Basically, you want to render this with a very light gray and make sure your pencil work is very minimal. Look at this cape. There are no edges. There's no stitching. There's no construction. It's basically just cut and maybe there's glue somewhere, okay? But because there are no solid lines, you want to make sure your line work is super minimal. Obviously, this one, it's bound and edged all over the place, so you are going to render those black lines. But, of course, pay attention to your design, the way you want things to look. So unless you want that heavy binding, piping, stitching something, make everything super light to give it that super clear look. With shears, you always have to pay attention to how things overlap. Notice here is darker than back here. There's still cape back here, but since it's only one layer, just the back, it's so much lighter than here, which is the front and the back. These shadows, you see them, they're very skinny, and they're actually quite dark. If you isolate the shadow on its own, I pulled a C5 and a C6 in the OPAQUE Gray series to hit these shadows. They are quite dark. And grays have undertones too. This one looks like cool grays, so I pulled the Cool Gray series. If I were rendering this one, I would pick a much more neutral gray. With shears, I typically do whatever's underneath first. And you can either lay the fabric on top of yourself if you're working off a swatch, or pay attention to the different color tones that are happening. Here, she's wearing tights, but you can see that the slightly gray on top is making it darker. You can see her skin tone here versus here. So I'm gonna give her little knit panties, like you do. I'm gonna pick this as her light source, and I'm gonna give her some subtle shadows. And then we're gonna do her skin tone. Always remember to have a scratch sheet where you're testing all these colors out, all right? That's her skin exposed. And then this is the slightly darker skin tone. Her spine shadow. And smooth that out. And now we're gonna do the PVC. I'm going to take the lightest color and do an all over. That was a C0, and this is a C3. Where it's doubled over, it gets darker. So it gets doubled over here. That's the front and back, because you're seeing the hem. And then in here. And then waistbands are typically doubled over, so I'm gonna make that darker as well. And then I'm going to take my lighter shadow color. Remember, there's your light source. So we're gonna just a few skinny this side is gonna get the highlight. I'm gonna put in kind of like a drapey big highlight, kind of like this one, right? And then here's one that's coming like that, I'm gonna use this pencil. It's a 0.3. It's got a B lead in it, but it's a 0.3. And I'm just going to be real subtle with the line. And I'm not gonna really outline the skirt. I'm gonna outline her. Now let's talk about the last one, which is clear PVC with a hint of color. Don't freak out. My students would freak out, but really it's just like the clear PVC with a little color matching. The problem that a lot of students have is they think solely about the overlapping color. Don't think about overlapping colors. Think of each space as a different color. When you look at this, you have this bright, oh, it matches my pencil. You have this bright gold yellow. And you can make a white tee and layer the gold on top, and that's okay. And you can take a skin tone and layer the yellow on top, and that's okay. When you layer on top of lighter colors, that works, like I did for this little skirt. But people worry when you're overlapping on top of a darker color. Don't think of it as yellow on top of blue. Think of it as this green. When you're working on your own design projects and you have swatches, layer the colors over and see the green that you get, and go get a marker or mix a paint color that matches that green. And then you can add a little bit more yellow for layers of yellow on top of the green. This green is lighter than this blue. So it's easy to lay down this green and then overlap the blue on top. But this violet blue is darker. So you have to think of this color, these overlapped areas, as a separate color. Conveniently, for my demo, that this overlapping area color is very close in color to the shadow color for this top. So that's what I'm going to use. I'm using some of the new markers I got in Poland. Lay down the color for the not overlapping areas. I will tell you right now, I am unsure as to how much I love this paper. I will report back. I feel like sometimes I need to be doing like a one big video reporting back on all the art supplies where I kept saying, I'll report back on whether or not I like this art supply. Here's my light source. So we're going to put in the shadows. These pants. Now, because you can overlap this blue on top of this green, I'm going to just do the whole pant. Put those shadows in there. A little pocket, a little shadow for the belt loops. Soften up the shadow some. Now we're going to take the blue of this. And as you know, I don't go buy new markers for every demo, so I'm just trying to go for a close match. Okay. I'm going to put down a few layers so you can really see the blue. Where all of this is doubled over, you see it's slightly more colorful, slightly more opaque. For some reason, this is sitting off center on her body, so I just decided to mimic that on my demo. I'm going to drop in a little bit, tiny little shadow on the corset. That's my light source, so I'm going to have this one, like the hip facing up and out, is going to have a nice big highlight. A little bit here, another one here. So always when it's facing the light, it's going to get the biggest highlights. Like this one, you can tell there's a really strong light coming in this direction. So they have that one. And then this one is where like the plastic picks up, so it picks up another piece of that light. And then you can see there's all this white stitching. So I'm going to do that with a gel pen. What did I forget? These areas. Good job. So I'm going to take this color again. Ta-da! No big whoop. Slightly out of order. It's fine. And then if you want to put in another smaller highlight over here. And then again, I'm going to put in the details of the garment, but I am going to, again, keep my line work not as strong. You see how gentle my line work is? Especially those of you who are used to the way I render, I do tend to get a little bit more significant with my line. Questions, leave them in the comments section below. Do let me know in the comments if you want that art supply quick review roundup. Is your first one gonna turn out to be amazing? Possibly, probably not. Do not be afraid of that. Do not be ashamed of that, because I've been painting for 716 years. You probably have not, and that's okay. Remember, hashtag it's hard because it's hard, not because there's anything wrong with you. Hashtag if your first one sucks, you're right on track. What does that mean, Zoe? It means you tried it, you did it, and so you're better off than all the people who are too afraid to try it. If your first one sucks, you're right on track. Hashtag always be practicing. Hashtag it's practice, not magic. Where did that come from? It's from when students in my class would watch me demo and say, Zoe, that looks like magic. And I would say, I'm not made of magic, I'm made of practice. So, hashtag practice, not magic, and I will see you in the next video.